Hello, and welcome to this brief little presentations about some research I was doing. And first of all, what's this all about? Well, recently there was the news that Cycles, our beloved render engine, has been released as under the license Apache 2. Okay, who thinks this is a good decision? Okay. Who thinks this is a bad decision? No one? Wow. And who doesn't care at all? Okay, so there are obviously a few people who neither think it's good nor bad, nor do they not care. Okay, well, this release of Cycles under Apache 2, what does this actually mean? Well, it means that somebody who would like to create his own render engine, and for example for 3ds Max or so a new render engine, could take Cycles, the Cycles source code, add improvements to it, and sell the render engine without sharing the source code, without sharing the sources back. And well, if you're from the open source movement or a little involved in this, you might think, oh, that's of course a very bad idea. So that other people can take, persons can take your work and not give anything back. Well, these are a few reactions of Blender users to this decision. And I've collected them. It's plain copy and paste from code.blender.org from the discussion. And it seems like many people think this is a bad decision. So how come? And how comes that all this discussion is going on? Yeah?
Where was this gathered?
Code.blender.org, and there was this article that Cycles has been released under Apache 2, and it's just a few of the comments I just. Yeah, it's a pretty extreme, the reactions, right? Well, I remember a similar discussion from a while ago, that was 2 years ago, at FMX in Stuttgart. FMX is a big fair, it's like the German SIGGRAPH, and there was a panel on open source in the visual effects industry. And here you see a few Blender heads, including Ton Rosendahl, sitting in the audience. And it's strange, it's a strange picture, because I thought that Ton Rosendahl, this guy here, would be sitting on the panel, because Blender is the biggest open source application you can use for visual effects. But obviously he wasn't invited. So who was there on the panel? Obviously not Ton Rosendahl. Obviously not this guy. No. On the panel there were those people who invented this stuff here. And you see, obviously, it's all interesting open source projects. Many of them, like Open Shading Language, OpenImage.io, OpenEXR, have already been integrated into Blender. So you see that actually open source software created by big studios who are doing big movies for Hollywood actually contribute to Blender indirectly. And the interesting thing about this panel talk was that they talked a lot about licensing. Each and every one of these projects is released under a so-called permissive license. So actually, each of these studios allow their software to be used in a commercial environment, in a closed production, and it seems like they don't care. And even more so, they told, at least on the panel, there was a discussion and everybody said, no, we want permissive licenses. We are only releasing permissive. We are not going to touch a single line of GPL code. We are never going to ever contribute a single line of code to a GPL project. And I thought, interesting. Why? Well, there are a few reasons for this. But let's come back to the reasons why I did this research. Well, on the same day, at the booth where we were demoing the newly released Cycles render engine, 2 guys came. It's not these 2 guys, these were other guys, this is just a stand-in picture, and they were from the Foundry, the company that creates Nuke and a few other pretty good programs, and asked us whether cycles would be released under a permissive license. And I still remember, John Rosenthal, do you remember what you told them? Do you remember what you told them after they asked you this? You told them... Yeah, actually you told them that if they would give us 2 of their best coders to work on cycles, then they would release it permissively. That was a very smart answer, I think. What? Yeah. But I still remember this thing, and it was actually a pretty smart answer because they didn't want to contribute any coders to the project, so it stayed GPL for a while. But anyways, all this discussion going on in the booth and on the panel really made me wonder what all this fuss is about. And a little later, I was at my university, and there was an opportunity to research license usage using a big database. And I thought, well, maybe I can contribute a bit to this debate that's going on and on, whether GPL or BSD or anything is better or worse, or whether it's good or bad for your project. So we get this database here, it's the older database. They gave us a snapshot to our university, and we started to do some research. First of all, just a small naming convention. I'm always talking about permissive licenses, and with that I mean stuff like BSD, MIT, which is actually allowing you to do whatever, more or less whatever you want with the code. And the so-called restrictive ones, the ones on the right, is actually GPL. And there's actually the only restrictive license that's widely used is GPL. And now for the results. Well, here you see just that open source is growing. The metric we were using was so-called source lines of code. So we looked at how much work is actually being done in open source, and it's more and more and more. It's growing exponentially, but that's not what we were interested in. We were interested in this. And what does this mean? Well, on the left, you see for a certain period of time, GPL was growing faster than BSD. That means GPL was more popular. The restrictive ones, it's the one on the right. The top bar, restrictive, the lower bar, permissive. This is how fast it's growing, so it was way more popular than BSD. And then on the right, there was a second period where the trend reversed. This happened roughly between 2000 and 2001. And since then, permissive is becoming more and more popular, and the growth of permissive projects, the amount of work put into permissive projects is since then growing faster than for the restrictive ones. One could discuss why this is going on. We tried to find out, but actually it just happened. Somewhere around 2000, things changed. And there were independent research has confirmed the trend, which basically means that permissive licenses in open source are becoming more and more popular. More and more projects are released permissive, and actually work is being done on permissive projects. And 1 month later, and I wondered why. Because, well, when you are when you're releasing something under this so-called reciprocal licenses, the GPL, everybody who is doing a change and is making it public, like putting out public binaries or something, he has to put the change under the same license. So one might think, well, GPL should grow and grow and grow and grow, and it doesn't. It's the opposite. Why? And we looked a little bit for answers for this trend. We're still looking for answers. But let's first see a small comparison of a permissive license and a restrictive one. On the left is the permissive, on the right is the GPL version 3. Okay, so if you're a coder, did anybody of the coders here actually read through the right one? I see. Okay, that's the first problem with the GPL. It's very complex. And if you're a company, which one would you prefer if you get code? If somebody has a project and you want to work on it, and you will give the conditions of the project to your lawyer, which one would the lawyer prefer, probably? No. No, lawyers hate the right one because it's so complex and it's very, very vague what can be done, what shouldn't be done, so it's not closely lit. Let me say it this way, the left license is one that's cheap. You don't even need to show it to the lawyer, you can actually do whatever you want. And the right one is an expensive license. It's lots and lots of lawyer money if you want to work on a GPL project and you want to know what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. That's one of the first reasons, but there are more, and that's really, really interesting. Companies have found a way to exploit the GPL so people work for them for free, but they can sell the work of those coders proprietary. And that's why other companies usually don't want to contribute to projects under GPL because, well, let me first show you how it works. At the moment, Ubuntu is creating Mir. It should replace the X server. And on the other hand, a few other companies are creating Wayland. And actually, Ubuntu is working on Mir all alone, while the others are working together on Wayland. And the main reason for this is that Ubuntu's Mir is released under GPL version 3, and every coder who contributes code has to sign an agreement that Ubuntu can relicense his code. So, what Ubuntu can do is, if a company wants, for example, a special embedded device, they can sell them a proprietary license and make money of the project of Mir. And the work of the coder, of course, he just worked for them for free, so Ubuntu can make money. And with the other way around, with the Wayland, with the permissive one, this is actually not so easy because it's license permissive. Everybody can take the code, everybody can make it proprietary, and if everybody can do this, it's hard to sell. It's like try to sell, for example, one of the open movies. Put it on eBay and try to sell it to somebody. It might be hard. But on the other hand, if you bought a DVD and sell it on eBay, you might actually get some money because for the DVDs there's this copyright thing and they are not endlessly, there's no endless amount of them because copyright is actually restricting the distribution. So you can make money off that by selling copies, but probably not of the open movies. And with the GPL, it's the same thing. Companies have found a way to exploit the GPL to actually control open source projects and exploit contributors. So this is actually very interesting how something that was actually meant to protect software and to protect users and to protect the programmers has turned into a system to exploit programmers and actually create a proprietary version and a free version and charge for the money of the contributor. That's very interesting. And there are a few other reasons why many companies just don't want to contribute to GPL projects. And and this is actually the reason why there is so many work going on for permissive projects compared to restrictive ones, because most of the code for open source software today is written by paid developers. It's mainly companies who are contributing to open source. We had a study that checked how much code is probably created by employers, by people who are working for money, and the lower bound for open source is roughly 50%. So roughly 50% of all open source code is created by people who are getting paid, so it's actually big business. It's not a hippies thing anymore. It's really, really big money behind and big business behind open source. And for many projects like the Linux kernel, it's actually more than 80% done by paid developers. So, of course, business rules start to apply and no longer the rules you might think from a cool community who wants to protect the code from something else. But, of course, for Blender, I think it's okay that it's GPL. That's something I wanted to show you here. Blender is showing a healthy growth. It's getting bigger and bigger and more complex. So if you take a look at this graphic, it's actually how many source lines of code it has over the years. And it's getting more and more and more, and it's growing more than linearly. It's growing super linearly, it's called. And you see it from the contributions, that the contributions getting more and more each year. And funny thing is that this development is actually violating a law in software engineering that says that the growth should decline over the year, and the number of contributions per month should decline over the years because the software is becoming more and more complex. And Blender is violating it. It's actually going the opposite direction. And that's also something we are actually researching at the moment. Why is open source software violating these laws, and why are there so many open source projects that are growing and growing and growing and become bigger and bigger? Really strange behavior. What? Okay, yeah. Of course, Blender is awesome, yeah. And so at the moment, many companies who are doing proprietary development are copying the open source development system, but they call it inner source. That's open source inside the company, and it's actually pretty successful compared to traditional software engineering. But well, some projects are growing even faster. And that is, for example, from the Linux kernel, and study, not conducted by us, by somebody else, and they actually show that the Linux kernel is growing roughly in a quadratic fashion. That's kind of extreme. And they took a look, why is this happening? And here's the answer. So this is what I want to close with. What you see here is that most parts of the Linux kernel are actually, the core of it are actually growing pretty decently. They are not exploding. The only thing that's exploding is the drivers. So it's actually more or less plugins. So those are parts that are they are well encapsulated, they are independent of the rest of the code, and they are just added, and independent developers can just add their drivers to the kernel. And that's why the Linux kernel is showing this extreme growth compared to other software. And I guess this could maybe even help a little bit the Blender development. If you start struggling with the contributions, like all the Google Summer of Codes and everything, the trick most open source projects adopt is that they're becoming modular. Like at the moment, this is happening with open shading language. For the old Blender internal renderer, you could create your own textures, but it was difficult, it was complex, it was very integrated into the core. And the new open shading language is actually so well encapsulated that it's becoming really easy to create new stuff. So yeah, this is my closing comment. I finished on time. Any questions? Yeah?
For the talk. I'm definitely in one of the crowd of people who is really into licensing information and nerd out. So I always enjoy these kind of talks. But one of the things that I think you were saying that you're not sure why there's been this growth in permissive licenses, but I think that there's actually a pretty clear reason as to why this has happened, and why we're seeing less and less copyleft adoption in some ways. And I think one of the reasons, and I'd be interested if you could actually research this and then and analyze it. We're seeing more and more libraries being released right now, and a lot of the paid developers. What's happening at companies is releasing everything but that top layer of the user relevance line of software. And projects like Blender are actually the end user line of things. So I'm actually curious what would end up happening if you ended up doing that analysis again, and then you split it off between libraries and then like end user applications. I have one more thing after that, but go ahead.
But let me first answer. Yeah, that's actually what we're also speculating about. We're also doing some research about how much proprietary code is actually left in proprietary products. And my advisor is actually thinking about that roughly maybe actually 80% or 90% of today's applications are actually built from open source components, open source libraries, and there's only a very, very little stack of proprietary code added nowadays. So yeah, that's actually right and confirmed. Most of the open source development is going on in the part of libraries and formats and everything. And it's usually the end products that are no more open source. Like, for example, also iPhone, it's full of open source, but the end product is closed. So.
One more thing. You ended up showing the MIT license and the GPL side by side, but the most popular growing free software permissive license is the Apache license.
That's also in there.
Yeah. Well, if you remove Stallman's essay from the top of it, you end up, and then you put the Apache license side by side, because Stallman included a long essay before there's any legal text. They're actually not nearly as far off in length as they are when you just have the MIT license. But
yeah, but I remember, but that's mostly the patent stuff from Apache, right?
Right, which is the reason why it's being very popular as in terms of companies right now, because they're worried about software patents. But anyway.
One more, and then we should move on. But he's there all conference to talk to him.
Can you go back a few slides? You're showing that GPL tends to have more steady growth than permissive license, right at the beginning. What I wondered is that one before that. You didn't want to talk about. So you're saying on the right you have
on the right is GPL, and on the left is permissive. On the right is restrictive.
Yes.
And the restrictive started way bigger. So in total, there's still a lot more. If you look at the total figures, then there's of course still a lot more GPL code released and more available. But the left one is actually started to grow faster, roughly around 2000. And with this exponential stuff, of course, the one who got the head start is way ahead, and the other one needs to grow a lot bigger. So they will probably, the point when there will be more permissive than restrictive code is way in the future, because the GPL had its head start. You see at the different beginning that GPL was growing way faster than permissive.
Okay,
and it's only, yeah.
My point would be if that's the reason of maybe when if the companies that are using permissive license, they are producing, they're adding codes, they're just not sharing it back, which is the biggest fear of permissive license. Have you considered it as one option, or? Because these absolute numbers, do you have any relative numbers when it comes to that?
Actually, what we were looking is just about how much work is being done, and if there is so much work being done, I mean, who's doing the work? There must be some contributions going back in some way, because otherwise this would be really strange. Who is doing all the work? It's especially since projects start to grow, and actually we were only looking at very active projects with many developers, and so. Somebody must contribute back, because I guess it's unlikely that a project has like 30 developers and they're all from the same company and nobody's contributing. Actually, there was another talk I have seen at an open source conference where they actually were analyzing WebKit, the permissive browser kit used in Google Chrome and in iOS, and they showed that Samsung and Apple were working together on WebKit during a time where they actually were in court fighting over patents. So actually there is a lot of collaboration going on, and even if companies hate each other totally, if they need the same stuff, then they're working together nowadays. Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
We take a very short break, and then we prepare for the last event of our last talk, because at 7:30 will be